Hey everyone, so I'm going to be reading off of the teleprompter for this video because it's basically my 12-page paper on the whole controversy of AI art. And now if I don't do that, I'm going to miss important details, and I want to make sure that I give across as much information that I can and just make it as accurately as possible. Please enjoy. AI art at the current time of this video has gone viral on the web. There's a lot of controversy regarding the ethics surrounding it, how data is acquired, and what it could mean for the future. I'm going to do my best to explain both sides. If you would like to have a civil discussion on the topic, please comment below on how we can solve problems if we need to after consuming this content. At the end of the day, there isn't really anything that we can do to stop AI other than writing to the people who house them, asking for changes, not using their product, and bringing awareness to all aspects as a whole. Eventually, maybe laws will get put into place. All of this is so new and is changing constantly. All references will be in the description below. Let's start with Claim 1. AI generators are stealing art. First, let's look at the accusation that artists are accusing the LAION Database or Stable Diffusion of doing, so we can look at the problem as a whole. From my understanding, artists are claiming that because AI generators can mimic the style of their art, because the AI was potentially given copyrighted material without their consent, that they are stealing it. Keep in mind that some AI generators could have used open source or royalty-free stock images. In a nutshell, AI generators create products, such as images, based on the material that they are trained with. They do this by identifying the similarities which might or might not make sense to humans. This can include the image itself, the tags associated with the image, and other related information. As an example, if an AI has been trained to differentiate between cats and dogs, it may be able to accurately identify a cat or dog in an image. However, if the AI is shown, say, a picture of a duck, it may not be able to recognize this specific type of animal. It may instead classify it as a cat or dog based on the similarities it has identified. In other words, the AI may not be able to say duck when shown a picture of a duck, but it may be able to correctly identify it as either a cat or a dog. However, if the AI is trained exclusively on Van Gogh's work, for example, it will produce Van Gogh-like images. But if the AI is trained on a variety of styles, the resulting images may be completely random. Next, I'm going to describe how diffusion models like Dalle 2, Stable Diffusion, and Google's imaging work. Images begin as they are, and over a certain number of steps, Gaussian noise is added to the images. This takes it from looking like a coherent image to something that resembles the static on your TV screen. When it adds this noise gradually, it leaves a path for it to follow back to reverse the addition of noise that it began with. So obviously, that just leaves you with the same image, right? Like, how do we get new images? Enter the noise predictor or model. I'm going to describe how it works on one image and then imagine that applied to billions. First, we take all the images, we generate some random noise, and we pick an amount of noise that we want. Say 0 is no noise and 10 is all of the noise. And then we add noise to the image in that amount. We then repeat this process multiple times, choosing different noise amounts on all images. Imagine that this is varying snapshots of your memory, where 0 is the memory that just happened, and 10 is that it happened many years ago and you can't really recall any details. Now let's take this and multiply it. First, we have all the images in the database, and we start the denoise process. The AI will then refer to the text prompt, which we will get into later, and look at the average of each pixel of an image that has those alt tags. Over time, in each step, it realizes what is or what isn't the text prompt to eventually making an image. All images start the same as random noise, but over each step, choose a different path to become a new image. Here is a simplified infographic from Reddit user Phyrexian Spaghetti that explains the process. So let's take a picture of a thing. Let's say a dog. And we will tell the computer, hey computer, please gradually turn this picture into noise and memorize every step while doing so. Now we take a picture of actual random noise, and we will tell the computer, hey computer, please play the dog to noise algorithm, but reversed. Now we take a picture of actual random noise, and we will tell the computer, hey computer, please play the dog to noise algorithm, but reverse it. And as you can see, that's not the same dog that we just had a moment ago, because what we started with was actual random noise, and it learned how to generate a dog from noise, so it's not copying anything. So how does text come into play? In Stable Diffusion, we use OpenClip, and Clip is trained on a data set of images and their captions. Most likely, Clip is trained off of images crawled from the web and their alt tags. Clip is a combo of an image and a text encoder. In this process, we're assigning words to images and embedding those words and images together. Until they are embedded, they will relate to each other, and this process may take multiple iterations. Eventually, we will have embeddings that can take the image of a dog and tie to the words, a picture of a dog. The process also includes negative examples of images and captions to make sure they aren't similar. Now that text has been included on those images, we simply add it as an additional factor in the image creation process that was described before, and allows us as humans to interact and tell the generator what to do. If you want to watch a great video on this, Vox has one, and you can view it in the description below. That'll help you have a better understanding of the diffusion process. Now the issue becomes that if the data the generator was trained on has less random material, then its guesses will be less random. This is called overfitting. Overfitting can happen when the artificial intelligence or machine learning is trained with materials that are too similar to each other, allowing too many degrees of freedom or parameters inside the model, and or allowing the model to be trained with too many steps or iterations, and the images that result will then be less random or not wide enough. With this being the case, it is possible that the image generated will be close to the material it was trained on instead of being random. Our goal here is not to generate images that are the same. We are going for style. To read more about this and have visuals, check out the description below, and you can see a really in-depth description on how this whole process works. The reason this isn't illegal per se is because the style can't be copyrighted. On top of that, copyright only applies to humans and not AI. Now, does that apply to the humans who program the AI? I don't know. In time, this might change via extension, but for now, it's completely legal. In Dave Grossman Designs versus Borton, the court said that, quote, the law of copyright is clear, that only specific expressions of an idea may be copyrighted, that other parties may copy that idea, but that other parties may not copy that specific expression of the idea or portions thereof. For example, Picasso may be entitled to a copyright of his portrait that three women painted in his cubist motif. Any artist, however, may paint a picture of any subject in the cubist motif, including a portrait of three women, and not violate Picasso's copyright so long as the second artist does not substantially copy Picasso's specific expressions of his idea. The part missing from this quote is that it doesn't mention the intent or action to distribute and or monetarily gain. Simply copying something doesn't infringe on copyright. It's what you do with it afterwards. Again, this only applies to humans and not AI, but I think it's important that we have some context on what has been set in court previously and we will be referring to later. Now, does that make it right? Just because something is legal doesn't make it okay. Humans can't do everything that machines can do in essence. Machines can just do it a lot faster. I could do the same thing that a machine does, looking at thousands of images in a style and copying it. It would just take me a lot longer, and that's if that's what we trained the machine to do. Now, copying someone's work isn't going to set me apart from the crowd, and people are still going to talk. So does this apply to AI? With enough time, it's easy to tell what is made with AI. And with Stable Diffusion 2.0, they have invisible watermarks that will help distinguish what is human and what is machine. when it comes to image transformation or deviations, the legal system is still pretty weird on the matter, and it depends on the situation. When we look at Andy Warhol and the work that he created, in the majority of cases, he didn't commit copyright infringement. The biggest difference between this and using copyrighted art for AI is that it could impact artists in a negative way if the copyrighted material wasn't given with consent. Okay, so let's move on to something else. How about what is stealing? Onto the point of stealing art. I would argue that the majority of people have illegally downloaded or streamed music, movies, TV shows, video games, etc. Would this not be considered stealing art? If this person had illegally downloaded or streamed art and has an issue with AI stealing art, would that not be hypocritical? It doesn't matter if they are making a profit or not, stealing is still stealing. I just want to make sure that we have a level playing field and we aren't lording ourselves as better over the other person. On that same notion, what about artists at Comic-Con who draw characters that are not their intellectual property and they still make a profit off of it? Or fan artists or cosplayers who have a Patreon and charge for images of the fan art or cosplay? This could also apply to Instagram Reels and making money off of that with their fan art or cosplay content. In my opinion, from what I can tell, that is no different and is illegal. Using something that isn't yours to make profit and or art off of that. A similar argument can be applied with the style of caricature and how someone created that style a long time ago, but we don't consider that to be stealing. Now, I've had some people argue that if the IP holder says it's okay, then it's okay to break copyright infringement. Unless there is a blanket statement out there from the IP saying it's okay, then you should ask permission, correct? And I believe, and I could be wrong, that most people in this field ask for forgiveness rather than permission. With that, the IP holder has the ability to withdraw that ability to break copyright at any time. And even then, this only applies to a certain point until the person breaking copyright either makes too much money or gets too big. Regardless, it's still breaking the law, which is illegal. And I'm not saying I'm any better as I've enabled and benefited from this behavior, but it's important that I'm fair to parties on all sides. In most recent news, there is a case of an artist using someone's photograph and making an artistic version of it and making a profit. That, in my opinion, is at 95% identical minus a few details. With how I was brought up to understand plagiarism, this is a blatant example of it. However, the judge ruling the case said that the photograph itself, or rather the pose, wasn't unique enough to warrant a copyright. So the artist, who the photographer accused of plagiarizing, won. Now, at first glance, it's pretty easy to say they obviously plagiarized, but consider this. If the photographer and the artist are in the same place at the same time, and the photographer and artist had the same point of view, and the images that are created are 95% the same, is it still plagiarism? All of this to say is that the artist didn't take the photograph itself and transform it, but instead use it as a source material. The artist began with a blank canvas, and with their artistic vision, used different tools to create something. Whether you agree with this or not is up to you. I know I personally feel icky about it, but I'm not an expert in law either. The photographer in question is going to try and appeal the decision, but this is our most current information. For the case of artists claiming that AI art is stealing the work, this does not bode well for that argument, at least in copyright law. It's important to note that regardless of the tool used, whether a person uses an AI generator or pen and paper to reproduce something that could be plagiarized work, it's not the tool that is at fault, but it's the individual taking the action. If one person steals, does that make it okay for other people to steal? Of course not. But it seems that when it starts to affect people personally, that it becomes an issue. We can see this happen time and time again throughout history. So the question that I have to ask is, why is it that we've decided that it's okay to steal art in some ways, but not other ways? If you would like to see the references on how selling fan art or cosplay can be considered infringing on copyright, I'll have them in the description below. The dance diffusion problem. I was first made aware of this issue thanks to Steven Zapata and a YouTube video he uploaded. The title of this section is direct from his. The dance diffusion problem is what brought me from being pro Stable Diffusion to being against some of its current practices. With how I believed I understood how Stable Diffusion worked, I thought that the models were fine, but you'll see why I feel different about it now. Here is a quote from Harin AI, which operates in Stability AI. Quote, dance diffusion is built on datasets composed entirely of copyright-free and voluntarily provided music and audio samples. Because diffusion models are prone to memorization and overfitting, releasing a model trained on copyrighted data could potentially result in legal issues. And honoring the intellectual property of the artists, which also complying to the best of their ability with the often strict copyright standards of the music industry, keeping any kind of copyrighted material out of the training data was a must. So it sounds like that they're afraid of copyright in music because it's more restrictive than art. When the dataset for Stable Diffusion was first made, they may have had the oversight of using copyrighted materials when they shouldn't have and are avoiding making that same mistake with music. It's an easy jump to say that it's a double standard in this instance, and it very well could be. Is it for certain? I don't know. Now, while using Stable Diffusion and making a profit wasn't the original intention of the platform, Lensa allegedly took advantage of it, and instead of training their own model on non-copyrighted material, decided to go with what was already there. Do we know this for sure? Nope. Generally, those who create with no intention to profit or cause harm are not considered bad, and Stability AI didn't create Stable Diffusion with the intention that Lensa allegedly took advantage of. This brings us back to the Comic-Con artists selling works of copyrighted characters because it's similar, not the same, to the actions that Lensa allegedly took. Claim: AI generators are going to put people out of a job. Yes, maybe. With every new technology, jobs are going to change. This same argument was made when photography came about. Painters were up in arms because now their job could be done at the click of a button. To experience these arguments yourself and to see the similarities to what's happening today, make sure to check the references in the description below. Another example is when the ATM was introduced in the 1970s, people thought that it would lead to an unemployment of bank tellers. And in fact, it did the opposite, and it increased the amount of jobs. I'll bet in our day and age, it can happen much quicker, but the principle is the same. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to like it, and that there will always be things that people want that are crafted by human hands. People still want legitimate paintings of themselves. AI, as of the time of this video, can't compete with the majority of what photography can do. It can do individual portraits at best, and that's only close up. Anything else requires a lot more work of the human hand, and it has no consistency. If you want your subject to be holding any kind of instrument, in most cases, AI can't make heads or tails of it. And a full body image or fingers? Dude, forget having a coherent face or the right amount of fingers. What I'm going to explain next is adapted from Frank C., who has worked in the video game development world since 1996. I found his comments in a thread on Lensa, and I thought that they provided a unique outlook that I hadn't seen yet. I've shortened the name for privacy's sake, and also keep in mind that this is just one example and may not be applicable to everything. Any tools that deal with automation have never made the milestones that go into video game development be complete any faster. Once those that produce the game see the work happen in less time, they just add more work on top so that it makes the time that the automation saved moot. Most game and movie studios struggle to create content at the same rate that customers consume it. He thinks that concept artists, in the realm of video games at the very least, will be fine. Sure, AI images can be created quickly, but let's ponder this likely scenario. You generate a helmet using AI. Awesome, that's great. Now, do you just submit it and you're done? Not at all. The client may ask questions such as, can we see this helmet in 15 different material styles, or see how that helmet animates in the straps function? What about, a whole bunch of different skins for DLC? Oh, I think we're also going to need a model of that helmet, and can you create it and send it to our 3D animators? And oh yeah, we're also going to need, HUD elements and the themes for it that feel unique for guilds within the game, and the needs for, renders for UI to make icons of the helmet for, the website. How's that going to look? We have to make sure, send it to quality assurance that it reads well on desktop and mobile. This example shows how image generation is just a very small part of a much bigger job. And on top of that, there are loads of other skills that are needed as a concept designer that deal with communication with humans, design with graphics, mechanics, ergonomics, world building, etc. And those are all still skills that are needed. Just being able to prompt well won't get you a job if you don't have those. Another great example that is in a similar vein was when Jurassic Park was created. Originally, the entire movie was going to be done with stop motion and practical effects for the dinosaurs. Computer graphics were still very much an infant at the time, and some of the computer graphic artists decided they were going to try to see if it would be possible to create the motion of dinosaurs with computer graphics. And using, after hours on their own time, they weren't told to do this. They ended up making a set of T-Rex bones that moved and walked. Producers came up to see something else, saw it playing on a monitor, and from there, everything changed. It's important to note that in the film, practical effects were still used, just not to the extent that they were originally planned. With every advance in technology, jobs are going to change, and computer graphics shook the cinema world to its core. To watch a part of the documentary on Jurassic Park, check a link in the description below. And any references, again, on the painters and their reaction to photography are also in the description. Claim: AI art isn't art. This one doesn't make sense to me because art is subjective. Always is, always will be. When photography was invented, it wasn't considered art until 100+ years later. Does that mean that it was art at one point and then not at another point? I don't believe that's how it works. There are multiple websites that are outright banning AI art, which is completely in the right to do. It is their platform. But how they can tell exactly what is AI art or isn't, other than just by looking at it, I don't know. In their own way, they are defining art, and whether that is good or bad is up to you, the individual. Art being subjective is what makes it beautiful, and it allows the child's drawing for the parent to be art to them, but isn't art for anyone else. In light of that, if we as humans are constantly challenging, like, what is art, are we really attempting to explore any further? A good example of this is of Marcel Duchamp when he submitted a urinal upside down with the words R.Mutt, 1917 written on it, and he titled it Fountain. This quote, which is believed to have been from Beatrice Atwood, from an anonymous editorial, said this: "Whether Mr. Mutt with his own hands made the fountain or not has no importance. He chose it. He took an ordinary article of life, placed it so that its useful significance disappeared under the new title and a point of view, and created a new thought for that object." End quote. Another example is Untitled Portrait of Ross in LA by Felix Gonzalez Torres. When you look at this piece, you simply see a bunch of candy in a pile in the corner of a room. What are your first thoughts? Probably that isn't art, right? Now, what if we add context? The weight of the candy is 175 pounds, which is the ideal weight of the piece, whether that, was the height of the average man at the time or that of Ross in the portrait. Ross Laycock, the person in this portrait and the artist's partner, died of AIDS complications in 1991. As visitors participate in the art piece by taking candy of the configuration, the piece changes and emulates the act of loss. And you can see it for yourself in the history and description below. I find that if we applied this to AI art, it's no different. After all, if a urinal with writing on it can be art, I'm pretty sure that whatever AI can make should be art too. That's just my opinion though. Claim: the LAION database has pictures of people from medical records, violent images, and non-consensual sex. This is partially accurate from what I can find as of this video. Because they use URL scraping, which in the USA is completely legal, images can be found and cataloged from all over the web. They don't store them anywhere. If you use the website Have I Been Trained, people have found medical record pictures of themselves that were illegally obtained after their doctor died and uploaded to the web. Obviously, this isn't okay, and apparently there is no previous legal writing saying that it's wrong. It just needs to be made. But, that shouldn't have been uploaded to the web to begin with. According to an article from Vice, I don't know where they got their information, whether it was a direct interview or not, Stable Diffusion, which uses the LAION database, stated, quote, Stable Diffusion does not regurgitate images, but instead crafts wholly new images of its own, just like a person learns to paint their own images after studying for many years. And then a Stability AI spokesperson told Motherboard, the Stable Diffusion model created by the University of Heidelberg was not trained on the entire LAION dataset. It was created from a subset of images from the LAION dataset that were pre-classified by our own systems to filter out extreme content from training. In addition to removing extreme content from the training set, the team trained the model on a synthetic dataset to further reduce potential harms. End quote. When presented with specific images of ISIS executions and non-consensual pornography, Stability said it could not say whether Stable Diffusion was trained on them and has since distanced itself from the LAION dataset. With Stable Diffusion moving away from that dataset, I think this solves the issue. And Google's Imagen, which is still private, has put measures in place to avoid this data as well. The real issue with these large datasets is creating a dataset that is appropriate versus obtaining one. Do you start totally fresh with an empty folder and input images one at a time to make sure that the copyright isn't infringed, or find a folder that has millions of images and check them one at a time to make sure that they hit the standard that you set? If we assign this task to a computer, how accurate will that computer be? And if a human does it, will they be unerring in their judgment? Claim: LAION procured every piece of art legally through Common Crawl. First, what is Common Crawl? Common Crawl is a nonprofit organization that maintains an open repository of web crawl data. This data is collected by periodically crawling the web and storing the resulting data in a distributed and open format. The goal of Common Crawl is to make this data easily accessible and useful for research, education, and other purposes. Now, how do we know it was legally procured? Websites such as ArtStation have it listed in their terms of service stating, quote, your content may be shared with third parties. For example, on social media sites to promote your content on the site and may be available for purchase through the marketplace. Accordingly, you hereby grant royalty-free perpetual worldwide licenses to Epic and our service providers to copy, modify, reformat, and distribute your content, and to use the name that you provide in association with your content in connection with providing the services, and to Epic and our service providers, members, users, and licensees to use, communicate, share, and display your content in whole or in part, subject to our policies, as those policies are amended from time to time, end quote. Now, shared is the key word here, and it's a pretty big gray area, what that even means. Most of the time, myself included, we skip over these terms of service and don't give it a second thought. Even if I did understand this legalese, and I don't know what the potential implications of the rights I'm giving them has the potential to do. Some ways to fight against Common Crawl is, like if you host your own website, is to employ a no-follow script so that Common Crawl won't crawl your website for information. If you find your work on Common Crawl, you can submit a copyright claim. Your success in this situation depends on how well you can demonstrate that your images are being redistributed without being transformed. If creating art is part of your livelihood, and even if it's not, we need to be adamant about reading and researching the terms of service. This is a prime example of how the public is potentially being taken advantage of without even knowing it. As of this video, there has been an update with ArtStation, and they now allow artists to opt in or out of being a part of an AI database, but has been met with mixed reviews on the process. And I learned about Common Crawl first through a Twitter thread by Gothlytical Art, the Lensa App, Midjourney, Dalle 2, and others. Lensa uses Stable Diffusion, but we don't know what model they used. As for Midjourney, Dalle 2, and the other datasets they use for training, they're not available to the public, so there isn't any way to tell what is being used. Now, people, companies, whatever, are innocent until proven guilty, at least here in the USA. And if we're going to hold Stable Diffusion accountable, then shouldn't we force the other AI generators to make their dataset public as well? Or does that infringe on some other right? I don't know. If we are going to hold them accountable, we also have to look at their original intent. Did Stable Diffusion remove the ability to reference contemporary artists because they were wrong or because people started to point fingers? Did they take this action to improve their public image, or was using contemporary artists actually wrong for them to do? Claim: the signatures that are generated on AI art is proof that the art was stolen. While on the surface this argument makes sense, let's dive in and let's just see how valid it is. Since we know how AI art works, it's inevitable that when it's learning, the signatures may arise because of the dataset it was based on. Many artists in our current age will sign their work as a way of authentication, and those artists who do obviously have copyright to their work. But does the signature mean that they have copyright? No. If we look back in history, the act of signing your work isn't new. Currently, with how copyright law works, is that you own the copyright until 70 years after you're dead. Thanks, Disney. After that, it becomes public domain. So if we have the evidence of painters, for example, since the 17th century, signing their work with a signature, and the AI decides to mimic that and create its own version to create something that feels authentic, does that mean that it's stealing? If the image is public domain, I don't see how it can be. Secondly, if we end up having an opt-in, opt-out option for artists who do want their images to be trained on AI, or the images used are public domain and the signatures still arise, is that stealing? No, it isn't, because they opted in. So I find that this argument doesn't hold water very well. No matter the intellectual property, if you have signed away your rights, the person who legally obtained the IP, they can do whatever they want, as long as it's to the letter of the contract. Lastly, it's not uncommon that with the prompts that you use for the words themselves to become transposed into the AI image. AI has learned that artists in general will sign their work, so to emulate that practice, it will generate some kind of gibberish squiggle because it's trying to emulate artists. Examples of paintings with signatures in the 17th century and others can be found in the description below. People claiming AI art as something they made by hand. I mean, just be honest about how your art was created. I see multiple artists who use a combination of Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and Photoshop in order to create something that they're happy with. They still have a human hand involved, and if you have an issue with that, then we need to discuss where the line is drawn. Why is it that people are upset about AI art, but not all the other avenues that AI is used in? AI copywriting has been around for quite a while now, and being able to write entire blogs or articles, it was trained to millions of literary sources online, and yet I haven't seen any backlash to the level that it has for artists. Would that also not affect the jobs of copywriters? Or what about AI being used in rotoscoping or tracking in videos? That is taking away the man hours that someone would do by hand and putting it in the hands of a machine. Does that make it wrong? Maybe because AI art as a word is just more tangible than AI copywriting, and this is the straw that finally broke the camel's back. I hope that the zeal for ethics in AI art carries on to others. Why is it that we have ethics about AI art and not other things? I realize that this question is a huge can of worms. Like, at first glance, it appears, at least to me, that because AI art is a hot new thing, that people are allowed to be upset about. You have every right to feel the way that you do, and that's fine. But what about the other aspects of our lives? I mean, do you do the research where the materials were sourced and how they were made for everything that you consume or obtain? Phones, clothing, cars, food, entertainment, all of these have their own processes, and the majority of people do not research the practices behind these products. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're going to have ethics about one thing, then we should have them about all things, yes? Now, of course, you could argue that we have a chance to change the ethics here because it's so new and we could potentially shape it before it gets out of hand. And on that point, I totally agree. We've already seen changes in Dalle 2 and Stable Diffusion 2.0 and how that's already helped move in the right direction. I hope that there is, in some way, there's just a way to take the rush and zeal in this issue and transfer it to other problems like the fashion industry, for example. It's very easy for companies like Shine to just be a flash in the pan and drama and nothing actually changes. For the sake of argument, let's say that copyrighting styles and using artists' work for reference is not okay. It is currently completely legal. How do we change that? Now, of course, we have the artists who can have the opt-in to opt-out option, and if that works, then that's amazing. But if it doesn't, though, what are our other options? If we copyright a style, what does that entail? How will that affect future artists? If my art uses a specific tool and I copyright the use of that tool because it's part of my style, does that mean that no one else can use it? Now we're on a slippery slope, and I realize that this could be going into semantics, but I'd rather cover all of my bases and make sure it's discussed than to leave it alone. If we as humans use another artist's work for reference, much like how I understand AI does in the overall theme, should we not credit artists that inspire us? If creating AI art needs to have who was referenced in order to make it, then all human art should also do so in respect, right? Art inspires art. If someone creates a mood board as inspiration for their work, should every artist in that mood board also be credited? If we're going to hold AI to this level, we should also hold humans to that same level. And on top of that, humans are inspired by things just through everyday life and will forget those little moments or people that inspired them. We're humans, we forget things. So if we do keep humans to the same level of responsibility, we should allow for more grace versus a machine that doesn't forget. In what way can AI art with the Stable Diffusion 2.0 dataset still be used? If I don't reference any artist and just describe my scene, is that valid? In much of my own art currently, I've been using it as a way to make AI photographs of friends and people who have given their consent, or to animate my own work where I describe the scene and use my photo as a reference and not reference any artists. Does that make it okay? Or maybe I need to make my own models and then that solves the issue. The tool itself isn't bad, it's just the copyrighted material that was used is, or if it's used for profit, which goes back to, again, the fan art cosplayer problem. If you disagree, please expound below. How much human interaction does there need to be for AI art to become copyrightable or art? There is no right answer to this question. We know that AI art itself doesn't have copyright according to US law. Yet AI art, when created, does have some human interaction, if even only by typing words into a prompt box. Otherwise, AI art wouldn't get created at all. It needs a human at some point. So how much of a percentage does a human need to interact with AI art to make it copyrightable? Does it need to be mixed with other pieces of art, AI generated or not, to become something new by a human hand? Do parts need to be changed significantly from the original input? There is a current trending case of a graphic novel whose images were made by AI, but the speech bubbles, layout design, and story were created by a human. Does that constitute? We simply don't have the discourse currently to determine this in the court of law. What does AI mean for the future? When it comes to AI and advancements in technology, we need to ask the question, who is it going to benefit the most? Big tech and a few wealthy individuals currently control the advancements in AI. In this system, each advancement will likely bring a maximum profit to the already wealthy few, while the rest of the world suffers. Most people share the same fears about AI and the technocrats who have amassed so much wealth and power. However, we, the public, have become divided through many avenues, including that of the left and the right, and this division has created a stalemate in democratic governments in the process of breaking up the monopolies that big tech are building. If this continues, I imagine we will continue towards the age of dystopia, similar to that of Cyberpunk Edgerunners or Cyberpunk 2077, where only a select few are able to innovate and benefit from technology, while the rest of humanity relies on whatever scraps that the elites decide to give them. This doesn't have to come to pass, however. If we can unify together on important issues, overcoming what divides us, we can determine the direction that this technology goes and allow it to serve all of humanity and not just the wealthy. Machines have the abilities and potential to do everything a human does at the fraction of a cost when it comes to food, water, medicine, etc. But if the public doesn't take ownership and control, prices will continue their trajectory rising upwards and resources being hoarded by the wealthy elite. Conclusion. There's a lot of info to go through here, and it's important that you make the right decision that you think is right. I've done my best to be impartial, but I'm also not perfect. I really love this technology, and it's given me the opportunity to work with people I didn't think I ever could. At the end of the day, I believe that the issue is using copyrighted material for profit without permission. We are entering an AI renaissance, and nobody really knows what it holds, but hopefully we can remember to keep ethics at the forefront. If the majority on an issue believes something is ethically wrong, how does that majority make that into law? When laws in our current time come about, it's because those in power and money either are affected by it or can benefit from it. We can't trust big tech to be ethical. We've seen them fail time and time again. It's up to those passionate about the situation to make a difference. If you sat through that whole video, thank you so much. There's so much information to go through with AI art, and we're still forming our opinions. The law hasn't caught up. There's so many things that we have issues with. So I think the more that we continue to discuss this topic and try to find solutions that can work for both parties, I think that we're going to move in the right direction. Let me know what you think in the comments and stuff below and all that jazz. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks.